want to hear your reactions to Monaco, kind of, but I better not indulge that too much. Did you watch qualifying and the race, both sessions, or both events?
Yeah, we
Okay,
watched the qualifications. I feel like qualification was more exciting than the actual race.
okay.
There's a little bit more collisions and things going wrong. The
Hmm.
race got exciting when it started to rain, but we had to leave after that, so uh, we didn't see the finale.
Sure. That was a fun one. I guess tied into Marvel, anyone who's seen all the MCU movies is familiar with the Monaco Grand Prix from the way it was depicted in Iron Man 2. So, were you familiar with the race much outside of that context, would you say?
I had seen the first season of Drive to Survive on
Oh, yeah.
Netflix.
Okay.
I actually didn't realize there were more seasons, but I saw the first season. I liked that, and then yeah, of course, I uh, Iron Man 2 is one of my favorites. So
Yeah.
I remember it from that.
Yeah, very tangentially related to what we're discussing today, but I'll get into it.
Yeah.
I mean, we do kind of a cold open on these shows. The Thodcast, conversations about animation, podcast hosted by me, Philip Elke. I'm up here in northern Minnesota, and today I'm joined by my brother-in-law, returning from the Andor episode, Elliot Mitchell in Los Angeles. How are you doing, Elliot?
Howdy, I'm doing good.
Thanks for coming on to talk some Marvel. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's been a few weeks since this movie's been out, so a little late to the party, but this kind of evergreen. I really enjoyed this film and wanted to get it into the schedule. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. Has Samara seen it yet?
Samara has not seen it. I went to go
Okay.
see it with my guy friends on
Yeah.
opening weekend, but she hasn't gotten a chance yet.
Yeah, I wanted to hook you up. I mean, or thanks for hooking me up because I know you have seen it, and
Yeah.
there are various people I know who do the podcast with me who just kind of not quite gotten around to to seeing this in theaters. I guess certain people, it's not as much of a priority to go out and see the new Marvel film, and that seems to be perhaps more and more the case as time goes on, and we get deeper and deeper into this cinematic mythology that is Marvel Cinematic Universe, uh, and certainly critically, we've seen signs of stagnation, more recently, especially. So you said you really like Iron Man 2, which was kind of one of the earlier, like lesser regarded films in the MCU. But I agree with you. I really find Iron Man 2 pretty enjoyable as well. So like I'm pretty soft on these films overall.
Yeah. I like Iron Man 2. I know it's a controversial opinion, but I definitely think all of the I also like number three. Maybe I
Mhm.
just like Iron Man, but I thought the villain in number two was very cool. I want my bird.
Yeah, the movie has a lot of personality. I was let down by it when I first saw it in theaters back
Hmm.
in 2010, but upon multiple rewatches, I've come to really enjoy it. Of course, Guardians of the Galaxy, very much a crowd pleaser of a series, and I saw this, when it opened the original Guardians in 2014. I was
Hmm.
in San Francisco at the time, actually. That's where you just were, and watching some Formula One action with some family. Uh,
Hmm.
but yeah, so and that's the same family. My sister who lives in San Francisco is the one who turned me on to Formula One myself, and I've since become kind of a super fan. And unhealthfully obsessed. But yeah, Guardians. I think I even went to see Guardians 1 with Liza, my sister, in SF, after seeing it by myself the first time, because I was up visiting for like 3 weeks, and um, so I saw Guardians 1 by myself, really enjoyed it, and had good things to say about it, and convinced my sister to come see it as well. So that was a fun little bonding experience. But yeah, I mean, what an exciting kind of galaxy hopping, or the planet hopping adventure, similar to like Star Wars or other epic sci-fi fantasy um franchises, but also tied to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in a way, because there are events within that mythology, that canon, that take place off planet Earth, simultaneous to the more grounded events that we had seen in previous, more grounded, quote unquote, from other films like Iron Man and Captain America. But of course, like movies like Thor, and then ultimately the Avengers, brought in a whole new dimension to that franchise. So, it seemed prime for something uh, as expansive as this Guardians of the Galaxy uh, subject matter from some of the lesser known comics. So when were you first made aware of Guardians of the Galaxy, Elliot?
Guardians came out, I think 2014, right?
Yeah.
That was my senior year of high school.
Hmm.
So I remember going to see Guardians of the Galaxy opening weekend with a bunch of friends.
Hmm.
I remember being blown away by the soundtrack integration.
Yeah.
Just absolutely killer soundtrack. The mixtape was definitely on my summer playlist that year. And also, yeah, like you said, the departure from kind of the rest of the Marvel universe up to that time, from what I remember, being very Earth focused, very semi-realistic, I suppose. I guess grounded is a great term for it. Yeah. Um, it was a cool kind of departure into a interstellar adventure. I remember really liking that first one. That was definitely a hit for me. And then I actually don't remember where I was for the second one, but I did like the second one as well.
Hmm.
Um, I thought the kind of the culmination of the world being the ego being his dad, and the whole like he is the planet, but he has a kind of an avatar, and fills in some of
Hmm.
the plot from the previous movie. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. 2017 was Guardians 2.
Hmm.
Um, just kind of like, you want to see more adventures with these characters, so it was a good opportunity to just have them on another adventure. Ultimately, that film saw fairly like almost universe implicating stakes with
Hmm.
some of these plans being hatched by the villain Ego, and you do see like he's spread his proverbial seed across the entire
Right.
galaxy, and it's starting to awaken. I guess what is the inciting incident? That is it because he's got his son reunited with him, that he's now somehow like, oh yeah, like Star-Lord himself is some sort of avatar that
Hmm.
Ego was trying to create, and there
If
were so many failed attempts,
I
because there's
think
these stack of corpses or something. Yeah.
right, right. I think there was Ego was dying, I believe, and he wanted to
Yeah.
train Star-Lord to replace him. Um, this theme of failed creations seems like a consistent one in the Guardians franchise, which is interesting. Speaking of
Yeah.
Guardians 3.
Guardians 3 is a little like smaller because you're in just more one pocket of the galaxy, I feel, which I
Hmm.
like. I like that they didn't feel the need to like expand it, to even greater, heights and lengths. Um, and just keep it a little more intimate. But it certainly didn't feel small the way it
Hmm.
was told. There's a lot going on in this movie. I just came out of The Little Mermaid. You probably haven't
Oh,
seen that yet,
nice.
have you? Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean it's just it looks nice. It's kind of like going to enjoy I'm wearing my Walt Disney World
Oh, nice.
baseball cap. Yeah.
Retro.
Yeah, yeah. Appropriate for Guardians of the Galaxy, but the new live action Little Mermaid is kind of like going to a Disney World attraction in the
Mhm.
movie theater. A lot of cool, fun colors and songs, but it's just kind of bland and stale compared to a movie like Guardians 3, where there's just so many moving parts, so much emotion and complexity amongst these characters we've grown to love, and really that boils down to the kind of singular vision that's shepherding all of it in
Mhm.
James Gunn. You have that credit at the. I think these are rare in the MCU in that I think all three Guardians films do have pre-roll credits. And then at the end of the credits, James Gunn is credited as written and directed. Um, if I'm
And I
not
think
mistaken, yeah.
and I think they're one of the only of the superhero trilogies, I suppose, inside of the MCU that have the same director all throughout.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they like to get personalities to do a lot of these big budget action movies, these franchise films. I'm seeing clips of Black Panther. That was Coogler, Ryan Coogler's the director of the Black Panther films, like another up and coming indie. Well, it started in indie films and did like um Creed and then Black Panther. So it's just like um they want creators and artists to be putting their imprint
Hmm.
on this franchise. But that we've certainly seen that that mileage varies heavily. But you need a personality like James Gunn, who's now been hired to head an entire studio basically now because he's just got that much clout.
Right.
Um, to really kind of allow his vision to shine through with these Marvel films. So I'm just waffling here, but like um, the whole notion of comparing guard these sort of Disney live action sibling films, Little Mermaid and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3,
Hmm.
it's rather stark the difference between the two of them.
I mean, it is interesting because both of these movies are Disney's like big money makers for this at least quarter of
Mhm.
movies. I mean, Guardians 3 is the capstone for a trilogy that has been really popular, and
Mhm.
Little Mermaid, I'm sure, has just a ton of fan support for how popular
Mhm.
it was the original anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so it's interesting having two sort of I want to say blockbustery uh type movies in Disney's like lineup at the same time with just such vastly different audiences intended for them.
Yeah.
They're both under the same Disney umbrella, but you wouldn't necessarily mix the all of the audience for both movies.
The target demos. I mean, there is so much overlap with blockbusters. You really do kind of go for the four quadrants if you want to recoup the money that gets invested into something of this level. But there are very, very different kind of aesthetics involved. And so, yeah, as much as two blockbusters could be dissimilar in their intention, these kind of are. Um, it's especially kind of interesting because this movie, Guardians 3, is certainly one of the more intense
Hmm.
superhero movies. Like it does go hard. Gunn did um his last film was Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad. And that's a
Hmm.
bizarre story in itself where that was a pretty intense R-rated superhero action movie that was the sequel to sort of a disappointing um almost Guardians of the Galaxy style ripoff
Hmm.
from a few years earlier. Was that David Ayer who did the original Suicide Squad? But that you know, release the Ayer cut or whatever.
Yeah.
That movie was capitalizing on a lot of the same feature, trappings of like the classic rock soundtrack and this motley crew of heroes and anti-heroes teaming up. And it just didn't really deliver what was promised because it
Hmm.
seemed to have gotten, yeah, really messed with in the um potentially in the production meetings in the boardroom, to executive meddling. um
It is pretty funny though that Suicide Squad is sort of, the DC response to Guardians of the Galaxy,
yeah.
kind of a ripoff of it. And it doesn't work, so they bring the director of Guardians of the Galaxy over to do the like the reboot or soft sequel of Suicide Squad to try and like rescue it. It's interesting.
Yeah. People raved about that Peacekeeper, Peacemaker,
uh
the John
Peacemaker.
Cena.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I didn't see that. I should check that out on HBO now Max.
Yeah.
But did you see Peacemaker?
Yeah, I saw the first season. Um,
Has
it
there
was
been
interesting.
just one season so far?
I
I
let me
think it's
see.
only been one. Um, but it just so interesting with how fraught that the DC
Oh
uh
yeah.
and or the hero universe, they try. I guess they never really even settled on an official brand, but a lot of people just call it the DCEU, the DC Extended Universe. Um,
Yeah.
I think now they have the new James Gunn uh, regime did settle on a name for what they want to call. It might just be the DC universe, but I'm not sure.
Right, because
Yeah,
didn't they bring James Gunn in to head the DC universe?
yeah, he's basically the Kevin Feige
Mm.
of so now there's the MCU and I think the DCU, just
Hmm.
one letter off.
Yeah.
Uh,
To make it a little extra confusing.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
DCEU. I mean, the Suicide Squad films and like Peacemaker, kind of shared certain elements. There's a certain, I don't know, incestuous quality to all of those films
Hmm.
that isn't quite on the same level of a shared universe that MCU is ostensibly supposed to be. Well, MCU is, I mean, it's definitively a fully shared universe,
Hmm.
just with a few ambiguities, like maybe the Netflix, like you have the Daredevil and Defenders and stuff where they reference events from the MCU movies, but later I think installments of the MCU would kind of dismiss some of the stuff from the television arm of the
Yeah.
MCU.
Yeah.
So it's you can't like with Star Wars and the the expanded universe there. It's like
Right.
you can't ever keep it all straight perfectly. So But with like between the Zack Snyder films and Wonder Woman and Suicide Squad and now like Shazam and
Mhm.
what's his name, Black Adam.
Yeah, Black Adam, the new Flash movie.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
Flash. Yeah, it's all just going to collapse into one black hole with this new
Hmm.
Flash movie.
Right.
That'll be kind
They're
of fun.
doing their own multiverse movie with the
Yeah,
Flash, the Speed Force.
yeah, they're taking things across the Spider-Verse with all of these
Hmm.
uh comic book. It kind of worries me with Star Wars because I'm sort of a stickler for continuity when it comes to Star Wars. Not so
Hmm.
desperately so that like I've maybe said things on to you, or on the show like I just don't like getting angry about fandoms
Yeah.
because I feel like you get gatekeepery if you start acting belligerent and it's like that's not my Star Wars.
Hmm.
It's like no, this is all being told, and it's only ever good if it's being told from a very distinct perspective of a creator, of a writer. But once you inject personality into these things, then you run the risk of really kind of alienating certain facets of the fan base. But that's just a risk that you have to take. You have to have your Guardians of the Galaxies um, at the risk of once in a while having Eternals or Last
Hmm.
Jedi,
Yeah. It is interesting that, I mean, your point about like not alienating the fan base, like the original Guardians of the Galaxy felt like, I think we both recognized it as kind of a departure from the previous MCU entries.
Mhm.
Um, Kind of a courageous change to go up with you know, a retro soundtrack and a team of uh, characters who are less than
Savory
ideal.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
um, Similarly with the entries by Takio, sorry, I'm gonna say this terribly wrong. Takio Watiti?
Taika,
Taika Waititi.
the Kiwi filmmaker from the Thor. I mean, that was such an imprint he put on the Thor
Hmm.
franchise with Ragnarok, and
Hmm.
then he got carte blanche to do the fourth Thor, and people retaliate, like the fans revolted.
Yeah,
I
some
kind of like
people.
Thor 4, but yeah.
I enjoyed it too, but it's funny how within you talk about like uh Star Wars being kind of the a meticulous, or you could consider Star Wars like a meticulously assembled universe, right? Where everything is kind of in one timeline and the aesthetic kind of stays the same throughout. It's all Star
Yeah,
Wars. You can see the world.
as it should.
Marvel, as it should. Meanwhile, Marvel can kind of shotgun out these different concepts because they've built out this universe that's big enough,
Yeah.
especially with their space-based franchises, to kind of take things in really weird directions, like Love and Thunder and like this new Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I mean, a giant skin ball space station is certainly a aesthetic departure from pretty much the rest of the Marvel universe. It's
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that they can have that much room to play inside of their own universe without kind of uh truly making the fandom an
Mhm.
enemy.
Yeah. Um, are you have you watched like Rick and Morty at all or
Yeah, yeah, I think
it's
I saw.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty ubiquitous, but it has had some hiccups lately. I know that franchise, so and it sort of has become kind of cliche to bring up Rick and Morty just because it's trying to strike at a certain sensibility of just like really um almost caustic irony. But
Mhm.
I don't know, it does a lot of fun things in terms of its uh, concepts and sort of sci-fi, just chaos and anarchy. So like it makes sense that they would kind of borrow from that a little bit for something like Guardians of the Galaxy, this kind of irreverent space comedy. Um, and I know various creative uh, forces, writers and such from Rick and Morty have migrated over to the MCU. I don't know if you had heard that at all.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure how involved they were with this film. Guardian, I mean, James Gunn is the credited writer. Is he the sole credited writer? I mean, there must have been some kind of team at least that
I
made, yeah.
struggle to believe that any one person does any one thing on a movie, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, all of these big franchises have the brain trust, where there's I mean, even with Star Wars, you have like a story trust of people trying to keep things consistent within the universe. But I think different directors will, you know, they'll defer to
Mhm.
varying levels to these other kind of voices. Um, However, Gunn, insofar as he did that, it's very much on the screen in moments that kind of explains some of the events from the non-Guardians of the Galaxy films that contain, characters from Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers films, for example. And I kind of liked how that was handled. I don't know about you, Elliot. Like I enjoyed seeing some of the connectivity to the rest of the MCU as kind of sparing as it was in this film.
I mean, maybe I'm just really rusty on my MCU stuff,
Hmm.
but I didn't pick up on a ton of the connections in this one because I know we had a lot of involvement of the Guardians in the Infinity War movies,
Hmm.
um, and in the Thor, was it? Yeah, it was Ragnarok, right?
Yeah, briefly, I think there's like a brief shot of the Guardians in like a post-credit scene of Thor Ragnarok, but then they do have scenes in Love and Thunder.
Right. They
Um,
start off with Thor during Love and Thunder.
yeah, I'm
Um,
I'm more, yeah, referring to like obviously Gamora. She was, yeah,
sure.
she
I
fulfilled.
Yeah, I don't know. The Gamora angle of this movie was interesting. Um, I didn't I guess the fact that there's going to be another Guardians of the Galaxy movie makes me uh more forgiving of it, I suppose, because it sort of felt like in this movie they brought Gamora in and she didn't really progress at all.
Yeah,
Neither her nor Peter ended the movie with any real change to their relationship or their like attitudes towards each other. And I felt like that was maybe a little bit of a wasted opportunity. I mean,
hmm.
obviously there's going to be another entry into Guardians, and it'll probably come back as a larger plot point. But for them to bring her back for this movie, but not to like make much of a move in terms of moving their plot along, I
Hmm.
was probably one of my critiques of the movie, actually.
Okay, so yeah, we kind of differ on this, but
Hmm.
I do like that the consequences of Infinity War when Thanos sacrifices his daughter does have reverberations that last too often. You have characters who die in comic book franchises, and if you uh, ser what are they called? Issues later, they're brought
Yeah.
to life in some way. But yeah, I mean, Gamora, it's kind of cool that she can at least have a role in this
Sure,
film,
sure.
but um, I think it shows progress that Peter's able to kind of let her go in this film. I like how that is resolved because that is something he really struggled with, and he even mentioned in well, he refers to his actions in, I believe, also Infinity War, where basically he screws the entire galaxy, the entire universe,
Right.
when they basically, yeah, they basically have the glove off of Thanos, the Infinity Gauntlet off of him, and Mantis. I mean, she's such a clutch player too in her power set.
Hmm.
The way she's able to like manipulate people's emotions, but she's got her, you claws into Thanos and able to kind of loosen his grip. But then when Quill starts, Star-Lord, he finds out Gamora died. He just can't hold back, and he admits that in this movie that like
Hmm.
I I nearly destroyed half the universe
Yeah,
with because of my irrational love of this woman. I've at least felt, some of the backlash I think that character got after that happened, would maybe be difficult to shake. And I'm
sure.
glad this movie kind of um I think he mostly fully redeemed Star-Lord. I certainly don't hold anything against Star-Lord after such a the blunder that I think a lot of fans worried was maybe against his character in that encounter with Thanos. Um,
Hmm.
but
I don't think I was too aware of
yeah,
the backlash against it.
okay.
But I was struck in this movie at how few uh like I'll say classic in regards to like the first two movies
Hmm.
moments that Peter Quill has. I don't think he puts on his helmet during this
Hmm.
movie. And the two blasters do come out occasionally, but you don't really see as many of him, rocketing around with his two blasters with his
Hmm.
helmet on, uh, as kind of a his classic move. And I thought that was an interesting evolution for his character to leave behind some of his trademark.
Okay.
I think a lot of the MCU characters, have uh, their pieces of equipment that kind of
Uh,
identify them. And I was definitely surprised that they left behind the helmet in this one.
Gosh, yeah, I didn't notice that. He maybe doesn't wear the helmet at all. And I think that was even a piece of the comics maybe that maybe I don't know anything about the comics, frankly.
Oh, me
Um,
neither.
so but I could see that helmet design being sort of a one of the iconic images from the comics at least. And I think I think the thing about the comics is that there were like multiple iterations of the Guardians of the Galaxy, kind of like how there have been, several iterations of the Avengers or
Right.
various team up groups. Uh, this Adam Warlock character, I think, has been a feature of various comic versions of the Guardians, and like the Sylvester Stallone character is in the Guardians of the Galaxy in the comics as well,
Mm.
in certain renditions. Um, so it's kind of, yeah. I mean, who knows how soon we'll get a new film titled Guardians of the Galaxy? I'm not in any hurry whatsoever because this trilogy was just so satisfying for me.
Mm.
Um, but it does promise Star-Lord will return at the
Right.
very end. Um,
Which does sound more like a he'll be in another like a an appearance in another movie, but
could be, yeah.
who knows?
Yeah, I have a hard time imagining that Guardians of the Galaxy 4 not that, especially if James Gunn isn't directly involved or writing the script,
Hmm.
I can't see how it could be nearly as satisfying as these three have been.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it would have to be with the new team too, because
yeah,
they gave pretty great endings for all of at least the supporting rest of the Guardians team.
yeah. Thus is the dilemma, though, of these blockbuster franchises, because
There's a pile of money sitting there, and we could make another movie to get it. We could just keep milking
uh,
this thing.
it's Pandora's box. It's the what is it? The call of the voice. You just have to. Um, it's the monkey paw. You can't help but reaching out and grabbing it, even though
Hmm.
doing so will likely end in disaster. These um, what uh, mythical analogy am I reaching for specifically? But the hand of Midas. There, numerous cases within legend of the of Icarus flying too close to the sun. How
Hmm.
you can definitely have too much of a good thing. Um,
Right.
but I guess for now we can bask in. I mean, I really enjoyed Guardians 3. Bask in the success that has been this kind of conclusion to a trilogy. Um, and I guess by the time they announce the next one, maybe we'll be ready for at least an opportunity to to spend some time with these characters again, at the very least. I kind of felt the same way about like Toy Story 4.
Hmm.
That seemed a little unnecessary, but
Yeah. At a certain point, you're kind of just once all the characters have sort of solved their initial reasons to go on a journey, you're kind of like, what else? What are we plumbing in this next movie? We're sort of out of reasons, and then
yeah,
surely it's another inciting incident. But I think it's also interesting the I mean, we talked earlier about Taika Waititi and James Gunn bringing their own kind of artistic interpretations to the MCU. And there's sort of this trend, which I find interesting, in which like directors become known for their stylistic takes on things,
hmm
and then are sort of brought into a franchise to bring the franchise through their lens of how things work. For example, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, or I mean, to, uh, there's a new, or they announced a while ago that Taika Waititi was going to do a Star Wars
yeah,
uh, movie, and I think it's interesting that these directors are seen kind of as artistic mediums that franchises can kind of flow through to create more variation within their
yeah.
worlds. And
No, it's good. I mean, it's kind of necessary in order
yeah,
because they already get stale so quickly a lot of times.
hmm.
Yeah.
And these, but the interesting thing to me is that these like uh after these movies and the fact that they're in these cinematic universes, the characters, like the locations, all the things they like add into the universes stay in the universe after that director has gone past, you know. So like the fact that James Gunn may not do another Guardians of the Galaxy movie doesn't necessarily mean that another director coming to like use all of the various paints and watercolors of the MCU movies might not pick up the characters and use them in a future film, which is which is interesting. I'm curious about your thoughts on like what do characters belong to? You know, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously there's a source material, but
yeah. I'm just more concerned about like the story and the plot, in terms of the way Gunn has kind of woven these films. The characters themselves, like they're owned by the actors as well,
mhm,
and the franchise, the comic artists. So it's just kind of fun to revisit these characters. Rocket Raccoon, Nebula. Imagine, I mean, Mantis. We bet Dave Batista as Drax has mentioned that um, he might not stick around. I know because he was really upset when James Gunn was initially fired from
mm,
Guardians 3, but was happy to return once Gunn was brought back. Um, Gamora, she could return. So I see the value in a franchise, a sub franchise like Guardians, um, continuing and being expanded, just like you would want to see more stories set within the Star Wars universe.
sure.
Something that's so just rich with color and variety. So absolutely, we should, hopefully work on getting more quality stories told within this little enclave of the MCU. And I mean, the health of franchise cinema in general right now is maybe in question a little bit, where it is kind of a testing time for blockbuster entertainment. I feel with the future of streaming somewhat in question,
Mhm,
and even like the writer's strike and how people will be compensated moving forward, the stresses that are being put on um, visual effects studios. I thought the effects in this film were fantastic, and like the animal effects were very impressive. And it's like, how do you have a movie like The Lion King where the animals lack expression and depth, uh, and then characters like the lab experiments in this, showing so much dimension in their performance and still looking like real creatures. Um,
mhm.
I really enjoyed the artistry put into that. Um, but there will always be these blockbuster films in the MCU, but it does seem like sometimes the plans that have been projected really have a hard time being realized, in a satisfying way, or they just collapse entirely. Like the Taika Waititi Star Wars film might not happen. So many Star Wars films that have been announced have kind of dissolved into the ether.
Rest in
Uh,
peace, Patty Jenkins, Rogue Squadron.
yeah, and now
Ah,
the whole thing with what's his name even I can't the whole guy is set up in Ant-Man.
oh,
Rick
Kang?
Kang,
Kang.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's that actor's name again? But
Oh,
he's
I
uh
forget, but oh, you're referring to the allegations.
Jonathan Majors. Like he's had, yeah, some major issues come up now, so his future as an actor is kind of now in question. They might not want him to be the face of uh successive films within the MCU franchise.
Right. Right.
So it's just to illustrate how delicate these huge enterprises are. And then just how mercurial the audience is too. I did check the box office for the weekend, and it looked like domestically, Little Mermaid made close to 100 million. So I'm guessing it'll be a profitable film. But it's so bizarre. Just how those movies seem to have such a tepid critical response, at least, if not outright hostile critical response, just sort of a tepid fan response in terms of
For
how,
the live action.
yeah,
Hmm,
yeah. I mean, because you know, those original animated films are so beloved, and the
right.
soundtracks, and a lot of them have spawned, the Broadway adaptations, which I think these live action adaptations are kind of cribbing from a little bit, that whole
Hmm.
phenomenon of the Broadway adaptation. But none of these live action films have managed to really capture the magic of those original animated films
No.
in any sense. So I felt like that would end up being a bit of a losing proposition for Disney. But
Hmm.
if they're able to just keep kind of um churning out these adaptations that make money just based on brand recognition alone, then I guess they're going to keep doing so. But movies like the Ant-Man Quantumania, I believe, was a financial disappointment for Marvel. A few
Yeah.
other films, like, just yeah. I don't know at what point the spigot, when does it start?
Yeah. When does the cost
Yeah,
versus audience reception kind of break
start
even?
to
It's
dwindle.
interesting. You brought up the actor for Kang having some issues,
Yeah,
and
Jonathan Majors. Yeah,
Jonathan Majors. I remember the in the DCU right now, the actor for
yeah, the
the
flat Barry.
Flash
Hmm.
also has been accused, I think credibly, of some sexual assault type things.
Yeah, yeah. I think in both these cases, there have been like demonstrable serial
Hmm.
allegations of impropriety, and some of which have been like caught on video. Even I think
Hmm.
Ezra Miller, like, there's video of him assaulting people physically
Right,
or
right.
just behaving very weirdly. um so it's just not and yeah, I kind of get how when you shine the spotlight on people, it has detrimental effects psychologically. uh
Yeah.
you know
And also the extra illumination may show things, bring things to light that were hidden before.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but for being in such uh, large cinematic universes, I mean, they were able to they replaced Terrence Howard on the first Iron Man movie over not even, I don't even remember why they replaced him. I think they just didn't like where his character was going. Um, you'd think there'd
Yeah.
be an easy out for Disney and or Warner Brothers to easily replace actors um, who are problematic within their universes and have. I mean, the Don Cheadle switch went over pretty well. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, I think they might ultimately do that. It just gets kind of tricky when you're having to promote a movie and some of your lead actors, like if some of these allegations come out even before a movie premieres, then you've got your whole press schedule kind of
Sure.
compromised by now people are paying attention to the scandal. And like, yeah, it's you've got this. yeah, problematic association with your brand. But I mean, things like deep fake technology could
Mm,
potentially,
yeah.
uh, and there are legal implications involved with that. But I guess if someone breaches a contract due to impropriety, it could justify doing like a deep
Hmm.
fake replacement, and you know,
Interesting.
maybe yeah, yeah, certain contract stipulations would allow for that.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's all so dystopian.
Yeah, we're
So
certainly square in the middle of some very interesting and maybe scary changes in the entertainment industry. I mean, the writers'
yeah.
strike 100%. Um, I mean, a lot of it boils down to the role of emerging technology in
Mhm.
film. I mean,
Mhm.
can what's the role of AI in
Yeah.
stuff like this?
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
ultimately you don't want to be too dependent on technology because that could
yeah.
go away. I think the abuse of technology could lead to significant need for reform in the future. If AI, if we demonstrate that we just don't have the ability to responsibly wield something like AI as as a society, then perhaps it becomes kind of proscribed, sort of like Battlestar Galactica, like
We gotta
the,
take everything analog.
yeah, yeah. There's a huge, there might be a backlash. I mean, obviously, in extreme examples like that, it's like Terminator. It's like there are
Sure.
these apocalyptic events that occur and mass genocide level death and
Right.
craziness. You don't want to see that, obviously, as a result.
I I do, I don't want to come out in favor or against AI really on either side
Hmm.
because it's such a event horizon in the future
Hmm.
of possibilities. But
Hmm.
it is interesting as these franchises. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 is built on top of, I don't know, like 36 movies of canon prior to it. I don't know what the count is right now, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I
But
mean, if you throw in like the Disney Plus series and everything,
mhm.
it's a lot.
At a certain point, though, like, is it, and I don't want to come out in favor of AI too strongly, but
Uh-huh.
at a certain point, is it necessary for a computer or an algorithm to be making those connections in terms of keeping straight chronologically or uh, pulling like plot threads out of just so much content. Like
Hmm.
in order to become like an expert on the MCU and all of the different plot threads going on, I mean, it'd probably take a human
Hmm.
at least the amount of time it takes to watch every single movie and TV show. Um,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
no,
I mean,
yeah.
maybe that's just a tool that can be used by human writers because I do think human writers are absolutely superior to computers.
Hmm.
But whether or not the size of these universes that people are playing with
Hmm.
beget some sort of assistance in order to even utilize them fully, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm not worried about, you know, I guess the thing I'm maybe most worried about with AI is like uh, just the continued overload of stuff, of content. I guess
Mm,
if it becomes so much easier to create stuff,
sure.
then just becoming oversaturated with high level content might, yeah, it might just cause people to tune out and want to get back to reality a little bit. So
Sure.
I don't know. That I feel like the problem with AI is like oftentimes it just makes up stuff.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so as like a fact checking tool,
hmm
it might not be the most reliable thing, but something like that, would be a good use of it. Um, but yeah, like as far as a replacement for actual artistry, I think we should be very skeptical,
Oh yeah.
you know. Um, but I don't know. I think it will always have pretty decent ways of checking against the AI artists infiltrating the true creative outlets
hmm
designed to appeal to a wide audience. Although based on what people consume on a mass scale, there will inevitably be completely AI generated pieces of content, pieces of art that I think will prove very commercially successful at some
hmm
point.
The Transformers 16 X Fast and
Yeah,
Furious 37. Yeah.
the Transformers crossover with that. There was a podcast I heard recently that was proposing Fast and the Furious Transformers crossover, and they were like, well, this guy, this commenter, this podcaster, like the two are so similar in his mind, and the fact that certain actors have appeared in both, was it not The Rock, um, not Vin
Vin
Diesel.
Diesel, I thought showed
Yeah.
up in one of the Transformers movies. I could be very wrong though.
Um, yeah, I'm trying to remember.
It is hilarious though. I mean, I watched the in the theater to see Guardians 3. I saw the trailer for Fast and Furious X, I
Hmm.
think, and Transformers Rise of the Beasts like back to back, and I'm like, these are the same movie. Like just put them together.
Yeah, I've only seen the first two Fast and the Furious. I'm gonna check out the third Tokyo Drift sometime soon. But I'm content with listening to the discourse on
Yeah.
on all the Fast and Furious movies um without actually having seen them because I just feel like I'm not necessarily missing much.
No, no, not too much. But it is funny that, well, I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting that Fast and the Furious has its own cinematic universe and is doing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that to me does feel like if AI created a film franchise and it happened to be super successful, that would be Fast and the Furious.
Right.
That's been
Yeah.
sort of my aversion to that franchise largely, is it just
hmm
kind of feels like brainless content, which honestly kind of sounds therapeutic in a way. I like the idea in some contexts of just going to the movie theater or flipping on the TV and just kind of shutting off my brain for a little while.
Yeah.
More and more, that there are times in my life where I feel like I gotta just kind of zone out. I think
hmm
the best way to do that though is to just avoid screens entire, take a fast from screens
Sure.
altogether and get out in nature.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of renders that somewhat moot. But people do like they'll put things on and just have it in the background kind of as comfort. Um,
Right. Right.
well,
I'm curious on your thoughts on the animal testing and sort of that aspect of this latest Guardians installment. I mean, they had kind of touched on it on previous movies about like Raccoon was a lab experiment
mhm.
and whatnot, but this movie really took that, ran with it, and made it very dark.
Yeah.
I went back and looked at the rating because I was curious, and it's only PG-13, which
Mm.
I was kind of like, huh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone on all sorts of tangents here, so it's I'm great to get back to friggin' Guardians 3 as our uh topic, and the fact that the movie does go very hard, kind of like James Gunn's Suicide film that was rated R.
Hmm.
This, Disney would never have let him, go full R with this, and I don't think he necessarily would have wanted to, cut off an entire segment of the movie going public by making it restricted. But yeah, I mean, you get an F word, you're only allowed one technically in a PG-13.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
kind of like the way it it was just the most innocuous thing ever.
Hmm.
It wasn't like this big dramatic beat, which I kind of like that it was just this tossed off thing.
It felt more like a, slice of life peak than a
Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, like the violence against, I mean, I guess I was, yeah, initially just very, frankly, I'm impressed when they're willing to go hard in some of these
Hmm.
movies that can often just feel very sanitized. But like the little baby raccoon that's just been straight up scalped. It's
Yeah.
got the
Yeah.
exposed freaking skull, and the
Yeah.
cranium is just sticking out there. It's like, whoa, that's you usually don't see that in a Disney movie.
Yeah, it was a level of horror. Yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
it was horror, in which I feel like has been largely absent from MCU type stuff in the past. I didn't see Morbius though. I heard that was a little more I
What? Which one?
didn't see Morbius though. I
Oh,
heard that one had some more
I mean, yeah, it's a Marvel property, but not MCU really. I mean, certainly there's the whole multiverse that allows for um at least a tangential relationship. Someone said I looked like Jared Leto today, but so I've gotten that a few times.
yeah.
So I was like, "Hey, have you seen Morbius?" Uh, and she was like, "Yeah." It's like it's Morbin time.
It's Morbin time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like especially yeah, Disney I think keeps things a little bit extra, I don't know, kid friendly with the MCU. It's very colorful compared to a lot of like the DC films and kind of
Hmm.
you want to be able to take your 10-year-old to a lot of these movies. But this one, yeah, it really earns the PG-13. A lot of and a lot of adults, yeah, they'll struggle with the animal abuse subject matter. But
Hmm.
you can get away with it in a sub R-rated film because it's not because the violence isn't being done to humans.
Right.
So there's just less of a threshold there. And you can get away with more violence typically in an animated film as well,
Sure.
more blood and things like that. I don't know what I saw recently that had maybe a surprising amount of violence in a PG-13 rated, or maybe it was TV-14 or something, but just talking, discussing animation a lot on this podcast. It's there's certain luxuries, certain advantages to that medium
Hmm.
um, that unfortunately really don't get taken advantage of a lot of times because these big kind of corporate studios, especially Disney, they have a certain aesthetic, and it almost makes it all the more uh, a kind of fun and scandalous when they do deviate from that, when they do subvert kind of their squeaky clean image and
Hmm.
have something this intense. The impact is perhaps even more pronounced. And I don't know if that's justified or as a if that's a defense or what, like an earned, you know, um, source of praise.
Mm.
um, but it is fun, like when you have movies like Zootopia that get a little irreverent, being within the Disney animated canon, or some of the like The Incredibles for Pixar. It was their first PG rated film, and there was more adult uh, kind of themed content within that film that kind of made it extra exciting. So is it just because it's sort of adult themes wrapped in a more kid-friendly package that sort of piques your interest when you're consuming it? Maybe so.
Mm.
It's the whole notion of just selling something based on the pure scandal of it.
Sure. Yeah, like the
Pushing the boundaries, the shock comedy. Um, but when the bar is set so low, it doesn't take that much to seem a little bit shocking.
right. Yeah, compared to other MCU movies, it's definitely uh more so, but compared to like a
Yeah.
typical horror or
Mhm.
another thriller space opera,
Right.
it's not crazy
Yeah.
for
Of
sure.
course, with the animal stuff, I get it because like people are especially emotionally affected by scenes involving animals, so
Right.
that introduces a different dynamic as well. I don't know. Is that something that you feel extra like affected by within films,
No,
animals? Yeah.
no, I'm not. I mean, I'm not a vegan. I'm not a vegetarian.
Hmm.
I just thought it was an interesting angle for this movie to play up.
Yeah.
They really went for a they really went for a kind of horrific like to make you side with Rocket so
Uh-huh.
that his kind of arc hits harder. I thought it was an interesting tactic. I think it paid off. The and also the uh, the evil, or I guess just corrupted creations of the
The
oh,
high
what's his name?
evolutionary.
The
Yeah.
high evolutionary
Yeah.
were pretty scary. I mean
Uh-huh.
the animal heads on mech bodies and stuff. Yeah, it was an interesting angle for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, this guy, the high evolutionary. I mean, he seems like a human, but I imagine he's got to be, centuries old. There's probably a lot more to him than meets the eye. And of course, he's got that crazy RoboCop face.
Yeah.
But you see him prior to having it, so uh, yeah, great, kind of crazy how they're able to uh, have something that extreme also within this film, like basically the whole Dark Knight, Two-Face. It's a
Yeah.
similar visual effect, and
Hmm.
similarly horrific, but within a PG-13 content. I
Yeah.
mean the ratings are, I think, kind of flexible if movie studio kind of flexes its muscles a little bit and says,
Sure. Yeah.
no, we want this, and we're going to.
I
It's like,
mean,
yeah.
the rating scale is so subjective
Yeah.
anyway. Like how do you judge how much skin is too much or how much smoking is it's just it's yeah, it's a little silly and maybe a little outdated, but it is interesting how
Yeah.
the the studios interface with that. Especially things like Disney who are
Mhm.
trying to maintain their family friendly approach.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, to me, this all easily falls within that that threshold, but uh, oftentimes these MCU films, it feels like some of them should maybe even uh not even earn that PG-13 rating. It's
Hmm.
so, sometimes these ratings have gotten so watered down.
Right.
It's like the PG rating is now almost relegated to, oh, this is for kids, and
Hmm.
forget about G rating. That's for babies. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, obviously I don't like talking about something that has no artistic merit to it really whatsoever. I mean, it really does because it adds constraints to a
Hmm.
degree, especially with these big blockbusters where they have to hit a certain mark. So it is true that when an artist is forced to work within certain constraints, it affects the product, and sometimes in a good way.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, artists will talk about how um, adding constraints to their work only helps the end product come out more compelling. Using phrases like art and artist or terms, uh, when talking about these big blockbusters is a little sus. Uh,
It
but
is it is an odd I mean there are many artists involved,
yeah,
but overall it's corporate art, no
yeah,
one really is at the helm of everyone's a paintbrush and there's no
yeah. But yeah, there are times when it can really result in something spectacular, and we celebrate when that happens. But
Mhm.
I mean, uh, I think back to kind of my early days of listening to cinephile podcasts, and most of my um familiarity with film was just through watching big blockbuster movies, and for the most part enjoying a lot of them, but then listening to kind of critics talk about them, it was almost alienating to me, hearing them sing the praises of all these movies that I would never have heard of otherwise,
Mm.
and almost turn up their nose at a lot of these big budget, movies that are released nationwide, that that were typically the ones that I cared about.
Sure.
The indie movies versus, the big blockbuster studio films. Um, and just like, well, why is it that some of these commentators are kind of dismissive of the things that most people seem to like, or at least the things that most people consume? If these other things were so great, these indie movies, then why aren't they, the things that people are, you know, spending hundreds of millions of dollars to
Hmm.
go see at the theater? And it's just that's just how subjectivity works when consuming media. And then yeah, oftentimes with indie movies that aren't meant for everyone, that they are a very distinctive point of view oftentimes that your general audiences aren't necessarily going to always, they're certainly not four quadrant pieces, but for those to whom they're intended, they're often just so much more resonant than some of these things that are um, for the masses.
Hmm.
But it is so fun when the thing that's made for the masses is capable of kind of achieving a certain transcendence amongst the you know um, the critical consumer, shall we
Hmm.
say?
Sure.
And when that happens, oftentimes it becomes a crazy phenomenon. Like a lot of like the way that often these MCU movies have been allowed to you know become this massive behemoth, because it started with the movie like Iron Man that had massive kind of a groundswell of
Hmm.
appeal, and it was up against The Dark Knight, which also, critically and commercially celebrated film, but this kind of underdog studio, Marvel Cinematic, or the Marvel Studios, was able to come out and compete against Nolan and The Dark Knight, DC, and deliver something just as satisfying. And then that spawned a whole big mythology that continued its success, oftentimes just as much critically as commercially, including movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, the trilogy that this movie does, currently sit at, I think certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah. So that kind of wraps up some of my thoughts about Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and the state of blockbuster cinema that I kind of also wanted to get into, because I mean, even if some of the story beats are unsatisfying, which I did not find here, just the level of production value that gets poured into these films is kind of worth the price of admission on its own, in my opinion.
Sure. Yeah. The visual spectacle is often worth it just on
Yeah.
its own merits, but the fact that it turns into a compelling story alongside is a cherry on top.
A minor miracle.
Hmm.
Cherry on top. Yeah. Have you seen any other good movies lately?
I saw 65, not good.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Oh shoot. I'm gonna have to look at what I saw recently.
That's
But
okay. I'm trying to think. One thing that I thought really surprisingly good was John Wick 4, and
ooh,
I'd only
yeah.
seen the third one in theaters. I That was the first one I saw, and I didn't enjoy it very much because it is heavily dependent on having seen the first two.
Hmm.
And then so I did watch the three, leading up to the fourth, but didn't enjoy any of those first three nearly as much as I did the fourth one. So
Really?
kind of an underdog surprise for me, having enjoyed the fourth film as much as I did. Um, but
Oh, did you see the Dungeons and Dragons
that was very good.
movie?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was fun.
yeah. I enjoyed that a lot. And Renfield was a surprising.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was good.
I enjoyed that one. I don't think it was like a top tier movie, but I
Yeah.
had a good time watching it.
Hmm. The two Nicks, Nicolas Cage and Nicholas Holt.
Yeah.
He's Nicholas Holt. He's able to play kind of the bumbling sap.
I feel
Um,
like Nicholas Holt, as you I think suggested, often plays the same character, from Mad Max to
oh
The Great. But he's so good at it. I just always a
yeah,
treat to see him.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he can play heroic too.
Sure.
The Mad Max character, he has its heroic moments. But yeah, for whatever reason, I don't. He's not really popped as like a leading man, to the level of someone like Chris Pine or Chris Pratt, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans,
Yeah, all the Chris's.
Chris, Chris's. Yeah, I really enjoyed Chris Pratt in Guardians 3. I thought, as much as he's maybe had other roles that were kind of, I don't know, not really hitting, um the persona of Star-Lord is just the perfect match for Chris
Mhm.
Pratt. And I felt more connected to him and that performance than probably any other performance by one of the big Hollywood Chris's. I
Mm.
don't know. Would you
Mm.
say, you have a favorite, either a favorite Chris or a favorite Chris character?
Yikes. There's a there's so many Chris's.
Well, Pine, Evans, Hemsworth, and Pratt. And
Yeah.
Pine, he was Kirk, and the guy in Dungeons and Dragons and Wonder Woman, all sorts of things. And
I think I do tend to connect with Chris Pine the most in terms of it. Maybe just his movie his selections of movies that he's in speak
Mhm,
to me. I really enjoyed his performance in the original Wonder Woman.
mhm.
Um, I liked his take on Captain Kirk. He did great in the recent Dungeons and Dragons movie.
Okay.
Definitely, I think he has a decent amount of range, and when he plays a villain is kind of rare, but he does a good job in that too. Um, but I totally agree with you on Star Lord being pretty perfect for Chris Pratt. I think I mean, I've seen him in some other stuff. He was in what was it? The Timeline Future Tomorrow
Oh,
War.
Tomorrow War. Yeah.
Tomorrow War. It's hard to see him as a hyper serious leading figure after as an audience member seeing him do things like Parks and Rec and Star Lord.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, they say that it's easier to go to something dramatic from comedy than to go the other way, but
Hmm.
he just he has a great comedic timing, and his facial expressions are just he
Yeah.
has it down, and I think that it's always a pleasure to see him as Star Lord because he just kind of he fills that role so perfectly.
Yeah. Talk about an exception to that rule. Yeah, he's so much more interesting in comedic roles.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you just end up with kind of a dud project. Even like the Jurassic World movies, they were just very blandly written, I thought.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, we'll see what's next for Chris Pratt, but as much as like all the Chris's have done a great job in various projects, and Chris
yeah.
Pine, I think as just a performer, perhaps does have the most pathos. Generally, Star-Lord is I think my easily my favorite. He's one of my all-time favorite fictional characters, basically, in this
Yeah.
iteration of him. From Pratt, speaking of Chris Pine as a villain, I can't even really think of a movie where he's been the villain. I'm sure I've seen him somewhere, but I think he is a villain in this new Disney movie that's coming out called Wish. I just saw a trailer for it in front of Little Mermaids. So that's what made me think of it. But odd to see him as a villain, I must say.
Yeah, it also feels weird because he usually plays these lovable
He's
he
got
was in
such, yeah.
Don't Worry, Darling. He was a bad guy.
Oh, yeah, yeah. He's got such kind eyes.
Yeah.
He's kind of a very puppy dog heartthrob. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Elliot. This has been an extreme pleasure. I know you've had a lot of traveling, so thanks for sticking with me and indulging me.
Oh,
I
no worries.
can't thank you enough, man. It's great to hear from you, my brother-in-law, Elliot, in Los Angeles, California. So yeah, any other thoughts you want to share on today's subjects, particularly Guardians or anything else you want to say?
Think I'm tangented out for the moment. We went on quite a journey today, so apologies if that was out there,
Yeah,
but I had a good
exactly.
time. Yeah,
I I mean, that's what I enjoy about podcasts is when you have no idea where it might go, but
sure.
I've I've spent well over a decade, listening to long form audio media, and so my tastes in terms of how that has evolved, maybe in the slim minority,
Mhm.
just being able to kind of riff and ramble. But I don't know, what is it? What's his name? Rogan. Aren't his episodes like 3.5 hours long most of the time? It's like
Oh, I don't
he
know.
must really go off on some real auditory benders, if you will.
I do listen to some history podcasters that are in the like three plus hour mark, and it's
Yeah, yeah. I
just a
mean,
good amount of content.
if I really love a show and I see that the new episode comes out and um the cursor on the bottom showing, well, 3 hours remaining, I'm like, heck yeah, let's go.
Give me more content. I want it.
Give me pour it in my ear holes. Um all right. Well, yeah, that was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. So Elliot, do you want to share any social media or anything? Up to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you enjoy tangents, that's a good way to put it. You can follow me at Elamundo. That's pretty much my social tag just about everywhere on the internet. Yeah.
All right, I'll link to it on the episode info. And yeah, you find Thoughtcast at thoughtcast.com, at Thoughtcast on Twitter and Instagram. Streaming on all sorts of different podcasting platforms, even on SoundClouds, where I host the uploads. And you find me at Philip Elke on Twitter and Instagram. It's just fun to sit and chat about movies that I selfishly, I conscripted you, Elliot, because I wanted to talk about this movie because I really liked it.
All
But
good.
sounds like you did too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Until next time, this has been really fun. The Thoughtcast, conversations about animation, and for Elliot Mitchell, want to say to everyone out there as we sign off, have a magical day, have a wonderful week, and warm hugs from Rocket Raccoon.